Okay. Okay, so we are involved with the teachings on the Bodhicharyāvatāra, the way of the Bodhisattva, by the great Bodhisattva Shantideva of and following the commentary to that text by Khenpo Kunpel, who, not exactly a commentary, but he brought together many notes that he had taken under Paltu Rinpoche's teachings and other teachers, and then wrote a compilation of his notes. And so following the way that Paltu Rinpoche taught the text, we have been the teachings of it are organized around the 4 lines of a very famous prayer. Supreme Bodhicitta is so very precious. Where it has not yet arisen, may it arise. Where it has arisen, may it not decline, but evermore grow and flourish. These 4 lines, or the way of the Bodhisattva is can be considered to be, and Paltu Rinpoche taught it as a commentary on those 4 lines. So that the 10 chapters of the text, the first 3 chapters are how to give rise to bodhicitta where it hasn't, or in whom it has not yet arisen. And the second 3 chapters are how to maintain bodhicitta once it has arisen and not let it degrade or decline. And then the following 3 chapters, 7th, 8th, and 9th chapters, are the teachings on how to bring bodhicitta to fruition, to perfection, how to perfect bodhicitta once it has become established. And then the 10th chapter is a dedication of the merit of the text. And so we are now in the first chapter, and so as you listen to the teachings, then please do so with the proper attitude in a proper manner. Listen, as I talked a little bit more about it last week, or at the last session, how you should learn to recognize your faults as a listener. If you don't, like it says in one text, if you don't know how to listen, even if Vajrasattva appeared before you and taught to you, you wouldn't get anything out of it. So we have to learn how to listen, which on the one hand, it means avoiding the faults of a listener, which are likened to a vessel. In other words, basically the three faults of the listener are that the words just go in one ear and out the other. Seems like you're hearing it, but you're not. It's just it's not. It's just going in and going out. Another fault is where you're distracted and aren't even listening to anything. And another fault is that you're listening to it, but it's sort of feeding into your own personal agenda, usually connected with something to do with the kleshas, attachment, aversion, jealousy, pride, and so forth. So learn to recognize these and then, how do you say, banish them from your mind. And then what on the positive side, or how you do listen, is with an intention to benefit beings. And by benefiting beings, we mean reducing their suffering or eliminating their suffering and bringing them happiness and placing them in a state of enlightenment and of the unchanging happiness. And in order to be able to do that, in order to be able to create the conditions for you, for others to be guided on the path, then we ourselves, you yourself, need to accomplish bodhicitta. In this case, we're talking about the subject is bodhicitta. So you must you must give rise to bodhicitta. You must know how to and perfect the establishment and constancy of bodhicitta in your mind, and you must bring bodhicitta to perfection. It must flourish and bring about a state of your own enlightenment. And so in order to do that, then you're listening to the teachings with that attitude. So notice when that attitude is there and notice when it is not there, and then give rise to it, arouse it. At this point, we are in this first chapter, which in our text that we're using, and if you have another version of a text, then it's the same. The Tibetan is from the Sanskrit, and so the English is should be approximately the same. When this group of very expert translators working under Rinpoche's guidance, different Rinpoche's guidance, Khenpo's and Rinpoche's guidance, then they also use the same commentary, or this Khenpo Kunpel's commentary, to tease out the meaning of these different verses. It's a very poetic text. And so the first chapter, they're called The Excellence of Bodhicitta. In the Tibetan, it's actually, the title of the chapter is called The Benefits of Bodhicitta. We so far have covered up to the first 10 verses, and I'm taking a little time on this first chapter as I say, the first 3 chapters are about giving rise to bodhicitta. And so the first chapter is brings out the benefits of it. Sometimes in texts, you read a whole text, and then at the very end of the text, they'll talk about what the benefits of it are. But I think for us, kind of beginning Dharma people, we shouldn't just assume that because we have the good fortune to encounter the Dharma and have some sort of kind of karmic connection, kind of resonates with us, and there's many teachers, and it's quite for a country that hasn't had Buddhism in it for very long, it could be considered to be quite flourishing here. And that's something to do with the karma of the individual, it's our karma. And so we can just sort of assume in some sense that it's for us, wow, this resonates with me. So then you just kind of take off with it without really using your ability to analyze and see whether or not it's beneficial, what the benefit of it is. You may have the karma on the one hand, but then you need to contribute an understanding of why should I bother with this, even though I feel as though it's my own, like a Dharma, it just feels right for me. But we should really, as Shantideva talks about it, it's right in the first chapter. Like we need to understand what the benefit of it is. Practicing, developing bodhicitta and taking it on the path for the whole course of one's, what do they call it? Trajectory? It's not going to be easy, and we will get thrown off because of thinking that, well, bodhicitta is great on the one hand, but I really need to deal with this thing on the other hand. But to see how bodhicitta is such a panacea, it's such a wish-fulfilling jewel, that if we can use bodhicitta, if we get used to bodhicitta, if we accept and understand the benefits and the excellence of bodhicitta, then it's taught that it applies for everything. It's the remedy for everything. Even, toothaches. And so right at the outset, and I'm taking time to really see how each of these verses can be a source of inspiration and actually a contemplation. And right now we are from verse 10, 10, 12, 13, 14, these 4 verses, Shantideva gives examples of the excellence or the benefits of bodhicitta. And so we should think about these examples, not just think of them, oh, that's an example and this is an example, but like, why is it an example? So we ended with verse, we did verse 10, which uses the example of bodhicitta being the sort of the magic ingredient or the elixir of the process of alchemy. How it takes, basically, bodhicitta turns something that's bad into something that's good, just to the kernel of that example. We discussed that last time. And then in verse 11 now, the example is one of a jewel. It says, since the boundless wisdom of the only guide of beings perfectly examined and perceived its priceless worth, those who wish to leave this state of wandering should hold well to this precious bodhicitta. So it's like a jewel. If we have a collection of jewels or jewelry, or like a collection of stamps, like a collection of stamps that you think are valuable, then you would take it somewhere to someone who knew how to gauge what was the valuable one. Okay, what's the most valuable one of this pile of jewels or this collection of art or whatever it might be? So you would go to someone who was an expert. And so here, it says here, since the boundless wisdom of the only guide of beings, meaning the Buddha, examined, he used his wisdom, the eye of wisdom, his enlightened, awakened wisdom, to examine all the teachings in the world, not even including his own teachings. And he concluded that the most precious of all teachings is bodhicitta. It's more precious than any other teachings. And so he taught it. He taught bodhicitta. And those who wish to leave this state of wandering, those who wish to become free of the causes of suffering, the experience of suffering, then should not let go of bodhicitta. They should hold well and not let go of this precious bodhicitta. Bodhicitta meaning, as we mentioned earlier, and I'll keep repeating, especially as we go into the rest of this chapter, bodhicitta means enlightened mind. Bodhicitta means Buddha mind. It means the Buddha mind that you aspire to, and it also means the Buddha mind that's accomplished. So one should hold well to this precious bodhicitta. And we do that. You hold, once you have grasped bodhicitta, which is what we're supposed to do, we have grasping, we have attachment. So what Buddha is doing is saying, okay, you need to narrow down your grasping on the one thing that will free you from grasping, and hold tight to that. And that is the bodhicitta, the mind of awakening. And you hold well to this precious bodhicitta. You do that by being careful, by being mindful, and by being introspective, through introspection. And these three practices are discussed in the 4th, 5th, and 6th chapter. But it's introducing the idea of that's how we need to hold on to bodhicitta once it's given rise. So here, not only this verse here is Shantideva is teaching how bodhicitta is a precious jewel, and also he's saying that we need to rely on, in this case, the Buddha. We need to rely on someone who knows. So he's introducing the idea of that we need to rely on someone who knows from their own experience. Then, verse 12, all other virtues, like the plantain tree, produce their fruit, but then their force is spent. Alone, the marvelous tree of bodhicitta constantly bears fruit and grows unceasingly. So here, this verse. Now we're. So this verse I'll unpack a bit because there's something here. All other virtues, and by that he's referring to good deeds done without bodhicitta, without the mind of enlightenment, the attitude of enlightenment. Without that, so other virtues that are like that. The example here is this, like a plantain tree, a banana, I guess, some plantain tree that it grows and then it produces a fruit and then it dies. That's what we'd say what would be an annual. So they only produce their fruit one time. And like virtue, when you practice virtue, it's just a good deed. Generosity or discipline or patience or any other good deed, good action, then there's the karma of that action bears fruit, and then it's over. The fruit would be, say, some form of happiness or comfort for the one who performed the action. And the duration and intensity of the happiness that comes from virtue is dependent on the cause. It's dependent on the duration and the intensity, the strength of the generosity or what have you. And so the result is dependent on the different aspects of the cause. And when the conditions that brought that cause to fruition no longer support the experience of that cause, then it changes, it diminishes. We talked about suffering, I think. It becomes the suffering of change begins to occur. And by the way, when the suffering of change occurs and we start to feel that our comfort is becoming uncomfortable, then instead of experiencing the fruition of virtue from the past that comfort depended on, we begin to become attached to that comfort as it's being exhausted. And we start to act out of attachment or aversion. I hate it when this happens. I hate it when it gets too cold. I hate it when it gets too hot. I was comfortable and now this, So our comfort was from virtue ripening. When that virtue's shelf life expires, or that comfort expires, then we continue to hold on to that. And then all of our actions that we engage in to try to prolong or increase that happiness become the cause of suffering. That's why it's important, just as a footnote here, to really continually have a contemplation or an understanding of impermanence. Well, impermanence will antidote that response to the loss of comfort or happiness. Okay, now I'm starting to go off here. So, but here the point is that when your virtue is motivated by bodhicitta, then it continues to mature and fruit. It continues to reach, what do you say, fruition. It continues to have an effect until enlightenment, because bodhicitta means that you are engaging in a virtuous action in order to reduce, take away the suffering of every single sentient being and bring them to, guide them to a state of perfect enlightenment. And when that motivation is accompanied by an action, then the fruition of that action will continue to roll out effects until that motivation is accomplished. So there's sort of a karmic reasoning here, or reasoning. The merit of virtue that is motivated by bodhicitta always increases and becomes inexhaustible. Mm-hmm. If you, in the teachings on karma, then karma means the ability of mind to produce results. Karma is about the mind. The universe is governed by cause and effect. The elements interacting, heat, cold, stillness, movement, solidity, fluidity, spaciousness, all these elements are interacting, and it's all the simple acts of the physics of cause and effect. When when you boil water, fire doesn't intend to boil the water doesn't intend to be, it doesn't intend or want to, or it doesn't want to become hot, doesn't want to change into steam. It's just cause and effect, interdependence of inanimate phenomena. That's fairly well accepted. Then karma is a mental participation. It's the quality of mind to produce a result. And so karma has to do with sentience, beings who have a mind. And so in addition to cause and effect, there's this other piece called intention, motivation, that contributes to the outcomes of an act. If you heat water, your outcomes are very limited to that interdependent circumstance. But when you introduce mind into it, then it becomes quite complex. I say even only a fully enlightened being can really draw a line between the cause and, or can draw a line between the cause and effect. But one way of understanding karma that maybe some of you know, you should know by now, is that there is the what's called the fully ripened effect of an act. And the fully ripened effect of an act occurs when there are 5 factors in place. One is there's an object. The second factor is a thought or an intention. Then the third factor is that object and that intention, like if you want to give someone something, a gift, then you need object. So if the object is there, then you have the intention to give. I want to give. You say to yourself, I want to give that piece. Then there's the act itself of giving. And then there's the motivation, the sort of emotional or the feeling that accompanies that act. Either maybe sympathy or compassion or respect to that act of giving. And then there is the completion of the act, that act is completed. Say that person accepts the offering. So your giving has been accepted. So then that piece is, that seals that practice or that act as being an act that will have a certain mature, that'll have that there will be the certain experience of its effect if all 5 factors are present. In a classical traditional text, it talks about if you want to, if you see your enemy, the idea to kill your enemy comes, then you have the opportunity and you apply and kill your enemy with hatred, and you succeed. Then all 5 acts of killing with hatred, all 5 pieces of that act, the fully ripened effect of that is a birth in a hell realm. Talks about. Motivation is this, not that there's the thought and then there's the motivation. Okay, so speaking about the motivation, then the motivation is the motivation is the heaviest participant that determines the outcome of that act. But if all 5 of these factors are, if all 5 of these factors go to make up an act, then the results, the effect is certain. There'll be a certain experience of it. If there's any part missing, you want to go hunting, but you never see anybody, any animal. You had the intention, maybe you were hungry, or maybe you just don't like certain animals. You want to exterminate. So you have this aversion or hatred or what have you. But the object's not there, and so the act is not complete, but there's the karma of the other pieces that are there. So it's all kind of chemistry. And then when all 5 pieces of an act, factors of an act, are not present, then the experience is called the uncertain experience of the effect. Even say when you accidentally kill, you're walking on the lawn. How many animals, teeny little insects or other kinds of little animals you step on? You don't know. So there was an object. You had no intent, no thought to kill anything, no kleshas, no aversion, no nothing. But there was a completion. So then the outcome of that act is uncertain. The outcome of acts, of these kinds of acts, ordinary virtuous acts or ordinary non-virtuous acts, can either ripen in this life. That's actually, it's one of the qualities of a human birth, is that many things we do in this life ripen in this same life that an act was committed. Or the subsequent, the immediate next life. Or in the future life. Or uncertain. So it's uncertain. It says how uncertain karma, like, all the bugs on your window and walking, or just cleaning, what do you call spraying antiseptic, or these things, killing other sentient beings unintentionally, like all these kinds of acts where all 5 factors are not present. Oftentimes they mature, let's call them minor negative acts, because someone got harmed. You didn't even know, let alone it was an accident. But those acts seem to mature along with other certain outcomes. Those acts that are the fully ripening of karma. So merit, the point, okay, so that's karma, So karma, there's the fully ripened effect of an act. And then there's these certain and uncertain A and B of that. Then another karma has to do with the effect that's similar to the cause. The effect of an action is similar to the cause, which has to do with how, say for instance, from one life to the next. If you've been trained to kill, then the result of that will be a state of suffering. But then when you again take birth as a human, or in some higher, less oppressive, less suffering place, you'll have a habit of killing. Even small children have this, we see. And it's called the ripening that's similar to the cause, which was killing in a previous life. So you have, generations of people, and then of that do, warriors and things like this, and then those, not only the generations that are living, but that habit continues for the individuals into the next life, and on, continuously. And so these two aspects, the fully ripened effect and the effect that's similar to the cause, account for the act that is motivated by bodhicitta to be, to always increase and to be continuous until beings are brought to a state of awakening. So there's a reason why it's not just bodhicittas, like we're superstitious about bodhicitta, and it's, but there's a physics behind it, the science of karma behind it. There's also, just by the way, the third kind of fruition of karma is one's environment, kind of environment that you're experiencing. Okay, so that one is, this one, verse 12, has to do with a motivated virtue that continues to increase and become inexhaustible until Buddhahood. Okay? So also, when you read this verse, that's the message of the verse. But then also, you think about how that could be. How could bodhicitta account for such a big difference in the outcomes of virtue? Then you'll understand the benefits of it through your own reasoning, through understanding how karma functions. I say it's not like bodhicitta doesn't have some unnatural magic. Okay. So then, verse 13. As though they pass. Okay, this next verse 13. The example is of a heroic bodyguard. As though they pass through perils guarded by a hero, even those weighed down with dreadful wickedness will instantly be freed through having bodhicitta. Why do those who fear their sins not have recourse to it? So basically, passing through perils has to do with this hero that's referred to here. It's like a bodhicitta, and it's like having a heroic bodyguard that overpowers our karma. Even those weighed down with dreadful wickedness, like the example of a hell being, will instantly be freed through having bodhicitta. Even I think the first, our Buddha of this life, of this epoch, of this era, Buddha Shakyamuni, when he first gave rise to compassion, and he was in a hell realm, had a partner, that both suffering the results of very heavy karma, and pushing or pulling this heavy load, like just pulling it. Then he noticed his partner suffering so much more. He was suffering, but his partner was suffering even more. And the guards, the minions the demons were beating them more and more. And so he gave rise to a feeling of great sorrow and compassion for him. Compassion meaning, how can I pull harder so that this one won't suffer so much? This thought arose in his mind. And as soon as that thought arose in his mind, I mean, the way the story goes is the guards beat him so hard that he died right then and there, and then he was born in a higher realm. So even hell beings with the thought that has that's in harmony or it's in accord with bodhicitta, frees one from something so horrible as that kind of experience, that kind of effect of negativity. Even, all the great evil doers in our current history of like Hitler and Pol Pot and Idi Amin, whoever, these people, like at some point, they will, if they give rise to some compassion, then they'll be placed in a higher realm, and the thrust of that will bring them to bodhicitta and to bodhisattva path. So then this last line, why do those who fear their sins not have recourse to it? Basically, he's talking about Shantideva is talking about us. If we haven't, okay, maybe maybe we don't worry. A lot of people don't worry so much about wrong speech, wrong behavior so much. This age, one of the names of this age, a Tibetan name, it's a fearless age. It's fearless age. And that's not a positive. The connotation is not that it's a positive. This is, people are not afraid of non-virtue. So if the more you think about karma and impermanence and the realms of possibilities, then the more worried you should feel about your own future and your own ability to benefit others in the future. And so if we have this healthy fear of all of the negative actions that have not yet matured, that we have committed, that we have acted, then we need to worry. And like he's saying here, why, what's wrong with you people? You're not thinking rationally, basically. I think the commentary is something like, be rational. So this is the example. Bodhicitta is like a heroic, courageous bodyguard that even if you experience the outcomes of a negative action and are thrown into hell, with bodhicitta, it's like a ball bouncing. You go down and back up, it says. That's what bodhicitta, that's the protection that bodhicitta can provide even a great person, even a great evil person. With bodhicitta, it's like they go to a suffering realm, a hell realm, or whatever, and that with bodhicitta, then they immediately, like a ball bouncing out. So that one, 13. 14. Just as by the fire that will destroy the world, great sins are surely and at once consumed by it. Okay, this example is an example of fire, particularly the fire, the example of the fire at the end of time, or not the end of time, the fire at the end of the, when the great conflagration of the universe, when our universe, it's heating up, all right? So it's got a ways to go, but it's not that far in cosmic time. The universe begins to emerge from a state of voidness, and elements begin to interdependently create material substance and activity, and then sentient beings that have the karma then begin to appear in that interdependent play of the elements, and then there becomes a period of flourishing and growth, increase. Then there's a period of stasis. Then stasis means steady. Then there's a period of decline, and then it all blows up, and then there's a void, and then again goes around and around. So right now we're somewhere in the beginning of the period of decline, called the degenerate age. And at a certain point, then what in one of the Abhidharma talks about, then the sun gets hotter and hotter and hotter and hotter, and then a second sun rises, and then it gets hotter and hotter and hotter, then everything, all the green things go away, and all the water goes away, and then a third sun comes, and gets hotter and hotter and hotter, then little fires starts happening here and there, just spontaneously, then a fourth sun, and so on up to 7. The 7th sun comes, and then that just too much, and the whole thing just self-immolates, and the universe dissolved in that great conflagration. I think conflagration is the word, I think, yeah? So bodhicitta is like that great fire at the end of the time. Bodhicitta is like that when it comes to all these, particularly all of our uncertain, the experiences of uncertain karma. All the detail, all the lingering, kind of haunting little karma, minor karmic negativities that haven't found the conditions to ripen yet, that even this fire burns up that karma. This is a bodhicitta, burns up those karmas. Great sins and unintentional negative outcomes, great sins and unintentional ones are surely and at once consumed by it. That's fire. So you had the elixir, the jewel, the miraculous fruit, then the heroic bodyguard, and then the fire. So these two lines there are about the fire part, and then its benefits are thus unbounded, as the wise and loving Lord explained to Sudana. So then in summary, he's saying here, his benefits are unbounded. That sums it up. But there's 3 main benefits, we can say, of bodhicitta. One is that it causes the attainment of Buddhahood, which is the best benefit, but also it increases virtue and it purifies negative actions. Maybe we should reverse those if you like. Purifies negative actions, increases virtue, and elicits or brings about perfect enlightenment. All those are the three main benefits of bodhicitta. And there's many different benefits of bodhicitta. Here, this second half of that verse 14, its benefits are thus unbounded, as the wise and loving Lord explained to Sudhana. So that has to do with wise and loving Lord is Maitreya, and Sudhana, who was a bodhisattva, he was a bodhisattva, and Maitreya explained to him about all the benefits of bodhicitta. I think Sudhana took bodhisattva, he took a bodhisattva vow from Manjushri, the bodhisattva Manjushri, and Manjushri sent him to one Buddha, someplace, some realm, to learn the benefits of bodhicitta. And then he went there and then learned one, and basically then that Buddha sent him to others, other Buddhas, other bodhisattvas. And Sudhana went to 110 different Buddhas. And then came to Maitreya, and then Maitreya put the finishing touches, so to speak, on his bodhicitta training. And it was all about learning the benefits of bodhicitta. So we that's in the Avatamsaka Sutra, the Gandhavyuha Sutra. But all those benefits, basically, it's good to know that the three benefits are bodhicitta purifies negative actions, it increases merit, makes it inexhaustible, and brings a Buddhahood. Okay, 7, 8. Okay, so we're not done. Okay, then now we're going into the specifics, the specific benefit, like what is bodhicitta? And so here then verse 15 and 16, anyway, the next few verses. Verse 15 says, bodhicitta, the awakened mind, is known in brief to have two aspects. First, aspiring bodhicitta in intention, then active bodhicitta, practical engagement. Okay, so there's, I was thinking now this project of Tsongtsu Chenze Rinpoche's is 84,000, so this group is called 84,000, so amazing. I get more than every week a new translation of sutras that they've been producing. It's really quite extraordinary. And lately, the last few months, there's been must have been a dozen or so of the Mahayana sutras, and there's all this. I mean, the extent of the sutras, of the Buddha's teachings, there's just extraordinary. And we don't have any idea. So now with this 84,000 project, we can see when it says here, as benefits are unbounded, that's just one. You read these sutras, and it's mind-boggling how they talk about bodhicitta. Mahayana sutras, you know it's going to be about bodhicitta. And just the what do you call it? All the different categories, all the different ways to approach bodhicitta. And then another sutra talks, and then, oh my gosh, you know, there's 80 different kinds of bodhicitta, 37 different kinds of bodhicitta. And there are explanations of all these things. It's just amazing. So, and as I mentioned earlier, Shantideva, he knew all these sutras. He embraced all of these sutras, understood these sutras. And as he said, in brief, it all comes down to, from Shantideva's point of view, he reduces it down. Actually, there's two kinds of bodhicitta. That's so kind. Aspiring bodhicitta, and then active bodhicitta. Bodhicitta in intention and active bodhicitta. That's the way that he classifies it. Also, we should know, it says here, bodhicitta, the awakened mind. So there's, when he says, in brief, to have two aspects, aspiring bodhicitta and intention, and active bodhicitta, practical engagement. These basically, they're just bringing out relative bodhicitta. Another pairing of bodhicittas, as I probably maybe mentioned earlier, is that the bodhicitta is on the ultimate level. Bodhicitta means enlightenment. On the relative level, bodhicitta means the path to enlightenment. A mind that is becoming enlightened, not exactly is becoming. That sounds a little passive. A mind that's bent on enlightenment. That's one aspect of bodhicitta. And then the other aspect of bodhicitta is the mind that has reached enlightenment. So these two we should know, because relative bodhicitta okay, I'll finish that sentence in a minute. Okay. Relative bodhicitta here, so you should know he's talking about relative bodhicitta. There's the intention, or what's also the wishing bodhicitta, the bodhicitta that says, when we say, may all beings who are suffering, may they be free of suffering and brought to a state of happiness. That is wishing bodhicitta. Actually, not just to a state of happiness, but to a state of happiness and complete happiness of enlightenment. May all beings be free of suffering and brought to a state of happiness, of enlightenment. That is aspiration bodhicitta. Active bodhicitta, or practical engagement bodhicitta, is one would say, so that all beings who are suffering become free of suffering. All beings whose numbers reach to the very limits of space and are all suffering, may they, in order that all those beings are free of suffering, they must be placed within a state of enlightenment. And in order to bring them to that state of enlightenment, I am now reading this book. I am now listening to these teachings. And you're engaging, your bodhicitta is engaged in action. It's not exactly acting. Some people, they talk about that bodhicitta has to do with the mind. It's an aspiration, and then I aspire that my aspiration is that all sentient beings become free of suffering and brought to a state of enlightenment. And I will do it. That's wishing bodhicitta. Your focus is the goal, the effect, the fruition. Your focus is the fruition. That's wishing bodhicitta. Active bodhicitta, your focus is your wisdom. I will engage in actions that lead to enlightenment. This focus of attention is on the cause of enlightenment, which is the paramitas, basically, the paramitas, the 6 transcendent. Well, let's not even talk about the paramitas. The conduct of generosity, discipline, patience, and diligence, meditation, and wisdom. When your focus is on, I am practicing generosity in order that all sentient beings attain enlightenment. I am practicing discipline in order for all sentient beings to attain enlightenment, and so forth. Then your focus is on the cause of awakening. And that attitude, that kind of bodhicitta, is much more powerful than wishing all beings to be free of suffering and brought to a state of awakening. And so there's a distinction. One focuses on the result and one focuses on the cause. And of course, he uses the example here, corresponds to the wish to go and then setting out. So first you have the wish to go, then you set out. Like when you set out, you also have the wish to go. So active bodhicitta also has this aspiration bodhicitta. But aspiration bodhicitta doesn't always have engaging bodhicitta. May all beings have happiness and the cause of happiness. If we contemplate and do that, that's aspiration bodhicitta. So he says here, from bodhicitta and intention, that wishing bodhicitta, that aspiration bodhicitta, great results arise for those still turning in the wheel of life. For those still for samsara, it improves your experience of samsara. Higher realms, more comfort, less distraction, more sober. Higher rebirth, power, excellence, intelligence, lots of stuff, all these things karmically produced by this wonderful wish for beings to be free of suffering. But it says, he goes on to say then, but merit does not rise from it in ceaseless streams, as in the case with active bodhicitta, that intention to act, the intention to be generous as a means of leading beings, creating conditions for beings to be led to the state of awakening. So there's a difference in the benefits of aspiring bodhicitta and engaging bodhicitta. So it's important. If you were here, I could see whether or not you were getting it or not. I can't quite tell. But, it's important to pause and create a distinction, as Shantideva is showing us here. It's also connected with this, since we're kind of into the distinctions here. If you have the intention to act to benefit others in order to free all sentient beings from suffering and bring them to a state of enlightenment, that intention, that is bodhicitta, that is active bodhicitta. Even if you don't do anything, action itself, the act itself, like the giving or the studying or the action itself is called bodhisattva conduct. The paramitas, or the six practices, the six modes of conduct of a bodhisattva are the conduct that is carried out with bodhicitta, with both aspects of bodhicitta, ideally. But bodhicitta of engaging is still creating this virtue, even when they're not basically following through. So this is a point. It says, it says practical engagement, but in the teachings of bodhicitta, it's the bodhicitta means mind. It doesn't mean speech and physical action. That's conduct. Bodhisattva conduct. It's not bodhisattva conduct if you're just generous, for instance. If you have both aspects of bodhicitta and you are generous, then that's bodhisattva activity. That is the path of transcending of the paramitas. You don't have, maybe you don't have the means to practice that conduct. But if you have the aspiration, then there is an endless stream of virtue that ensues from that. So notice that. Now, in the last few minutes, let me see, what am I going to do here? I want to Okay, then 18. For when with irreversible intent the mind embraces bodhicitta, willing to set free the endless multitudes of beings, in that instant, from that moment on, a great and unremitting stream of strength, a strength of wholesome merit, even during sleep and inattention, rises equal to the vastness of the sky. Okay, so with this irreversible intent, now that's real. And bodhicitta, and that's real bodhicitta when you're, and what Shantideva wants from us, what he's teaching and showing is how to make bodhicitta a constant mental state, both intention and in action, intended action. Again, wishing bodhicitta focuses on the result. May all beings be placed in a state of enlightenment. Bodhicitta of engaging bodhicitta. Engaging bodhicitta is a mental state that intends to engage in a virtuous action in order to bring that, in order to make that so, in order to, that all beings attain enlightenment. And by all beings means you also, the doer. So when the mind embraces her, for when with irreversible intent, so when this bodhicitta is sort of unspoiled, uncorrupted, and when the mind embraces bodhicitta, this engaging bodhicitta, and here specifically maybe it has to do with embraces, meaning that you take the vow, the bodhicitta vow, the pledge to attain enlightenment. You know, focusing on the engaging bodhicitta, focusing on the cause of enlightenment. When you mind embraces and takes the vow of bodhicitta, engaging bodhicitta, willing to set free endless multitudes of beings, to bring them to enlightenment, to never and never turn away from the conduct of the bodhisattva, never to give up the bodhicitta and not to turn away from the conduct. In that instant, okay, from that moment on, then it says, a great and unremitting stream. I think that probably means keeps going. A strength of wholesome merit, even during sleep and inattention, rises equal to the vastness of sky. If that's a benefit, then that's worthy. That's astonishing that there is such a thing, that even that the power of bodhicitta, like a great wheel, you turn that great wheel, at a certain point you don't have to do it anymore. It just keeps going. It doesn't just stop. When you, in a lot of virtue, you do it and then you stop. And you do it and then but bodhicitta has a momentum. And it's like we were talking about earlier, this, like with the increasing merit in the plantain, not like the plantain tree, the karma that is similar to the cause, where there's that carryover, the momentum of that carries over lifetime after lifetime. This and the leading of that, the complete maturation of that, the effect of that. So that's the strength of that merit, that even when you're just sort of hanging out or sleeping, that there's still, that momentum is still in process, still informing your mind's as a cause for awakening. And that is the benefit when you have a genuine resolve or commitment of bodhicitta. That's what we aspire to, is this, to have a really genuine and genuine commitment, a resolve to do whatever it takes, by any means, bring beings to enlightenment. So if that, for a beginner, for a beginning practitioner, then the way to approach it is through the discipline, like in the Bodhisattva path. There's the discipline of the Bodhisattva. There's the three kinds of discipline. First is giving up negativity. This is with bodhicitta. It's not just becoming like a monk or a nun, but it's a Mahayana bodhicitta, giving up negativity. So that kind of, for we beginners, we really need to discern, be very careful in the discernment of what perpetuates suffering and what cuts the flow of what perpetuates suffering. Kleshas, irritation, prejudice, hatred, clinging, hope and fear. All these bodhicitta give up physical actions, verbal actions, and hold to bodhicitta. The mind is in bodhicitta. Then verbally, you discern between virtue and non-virtue that comes out of your mouth. And bodhicitta, and you're with your mind and absorbed in genuine bodhicitta, and holding to that bodhicitta, then your actions. So even it's taught, even like if you have bodhicitta in your mind, that strength of your determination to liberate beings from suffering and bring them to a state of happiness through your actions, then your actions may be quite from the book point of view, maybe not so virtuous looking. But your mind is intent on bodhicitta, then that action will guide. Well, basically, Buddha couldn't place people into enlightenment, okay? Every individual must attain their own enlightenment. They must basically realize their own natural state. When you realize your own natural state, that's enlightenment. That's to really simple language. And how that happens is through causes and conditions. So for the Bodhisattva, they're creating causes and conditions for others to engage in such a way with their mind that they begin to elicit their own mind's natural wisdom quality. So we use the language, place all beings in the state of enlightenment. Like Manjushri, I talked in the Sutra of Manjushri, how he would go to the hell realms in many lifetimes, and finally leading a being, finally conducts him to the Bodhi tree, sits down, he attains enlightenment, then Manjushri back to the hell realms, finds another one, one by one, like. But they're just creating conditions. So in order to do that, we need that kind of the merit that this bodhicitta produces. This is all on a relative level. Now, a few minutes left. I'll go back to what I was talking about. The two kinds of bodhicitta, relative bodhicitta and absolute bodhicitta. Some of you old timers, this kind of language, oh, all sentient beings equal to the vastness of space, are all suffering. They all must be, basically you're talking about infinity. The space is infinite. Beings are infinite. Suffering is infinite. Karma is infinite. Aggression and attachment and stupidity are infinite. And Bodhicitta says, I will lead every single sentient being to a state of enlightenment. We need to also understand absolute bodhicitta. Emptiness, shunyata. Here, it's the last, it's the 9th chapter. But I can't wait. You know, we should, it's not, how do I say? Like, there's an order, because you can't say everything all at once. Maybe maybe Buddha's speech, he could teach all 9 chapters all at once. But the idea, and as Shantideva says in the first line of the wisdom chapter, now I'm stepping out on my own here, you know, this is not the conventional, but he says, all these branches of the doctrine, meaning all of the above, all the 8 chapters beforehand, all these branches of the doctrine, the enlightened sage, Buddha, expounded for the sake of wisdom, absolute truth. Therefore, they must cultivate this wisdom who wish to have an end to suffering. Okay, so we should know that here at the outset, because we will get discouraged. I mean, every 10 years, if you look, how many people have you actually put on the path to awakening in every decade? How many? I mean, it's relative bodhicitta has to be informed by absolute bodhicitta, by the, for instance, in the Diamond Sutra, right in the first chapter of the Diamond Sutra, which is a Mahayana sutra of the wisdom category of sutras. The Buddha says to Subhuti, if I can't, if he says this in different ways, but basically he's saying that a bodhisattva is completely intent and wholly concerned with leading every single sentient being to the state of what's called non-abiding nirvana. And if that bodhisattva when that bodhisattva puts every single sentient being in a state of nirvana, if they think that they have actually put a sentient being or guided a sentient being to a state of nirvana, then they're not a bodhisattva at all. The basic core teaching of Buddha Shakyamuni is non-self. All these suffering beings, if you look, you will not find an identity that they possess. So anyway, I won't go into this now, but the way that a bodhisattva conducts themselves is to rest in what they either conceive of being emptiness, or logically come to an understanding of emptiness, or having an intellectual understanding of emptiness, or having some experience of emptiness, or having a realization of emptiness, and just abiding, what's called being patient with that realization. Whatever understanding of emptiness you have, that's how you would meditate, according to the Bodhisattva path. Then, when you are engaging with others, you're using like plain bodhicitta, relative bodhicitta, and your practice is one of engaging and benefiting others and leading them to a state of enlightenment, or that attitude of all sentient beings attaining enlightenment. And it's all, you consider it all to be an illusion, like a dream. So that's how you carry out a wishing bodhicitta, engaging bodhicitta, as if it was all an illusion. And the 7-point mind training is so beautiful in that sense, because there, the first training is absolute bodhicitta, so that you have some taste of that, you have some I don't know, some atmosphere or some feeling of that spaciousness. Relative bodhicitta should expand your mind. Because you're growing a very selfless attitude, a mental, relative bodhicitta is a mental event. And you're growing, you're very selfless, so your mind is expanding, becoming less self-absorbed or self-centered or conceited, but just self-centered, because you're always concerned with others, and your actions are for the benefit of others. So you are eroding this clinging that we have become habituated to, this clinging to the idea of your own personal identity. And as in mind training and relative bodhicitta training, as we get into the 8th chapter, meditation chapter, you're actually you're training to make others more important than yourself. Of course, by training in a gradual way in the relative bodhicitta, you develop kind of a healthy self-image, a kind of self-image that is very easy, or it's very fluffy and able to deconstruct. You can deconstruct it very easily, or more easily. Right now, we probably each have our own issues, things were, traumas and habits and cultural things and social things and all these kind of things, that have become patterns of how we conceive of ourselves in relationship to our version of the world, of what we think of as the world. And so it's very heavy. So through training, first understanding the benefits of bodhicitta, then you're starting to appreciate bodhicitta. Then you begin giving rise to then training in it, making vows and so forth. And then the rest of the book, basically, the rest of the text. And it results in wisdom, but it's wisdom that's beginning right now. When you consider how bodhicitta has certain benefits, you're antidoting self-clinging. Okay, so I'm going to leave it at that, and we oh, I said beginner. Okay, I only got to discipline. Okay, so for beginners like us, the way we practice the bodhisattva conduct, okay, the conduct of a bodhisattva, we should understand, learn and understand the discipline, meaning what negative actions are and giving them up, body, speech, mind, give up negative actions. And learn what the counter, or what the virtuous side is. But focus is mostly on giving up negative actions, because mostly that's what we're involved with, because of our self-clinging. As we loosen our grip on self-clinging by giving up negative actions, that's why we shouldn't jump too fast into, and oh, I'm only going to do virtue, you know, just because I'm a decent person and I have a, you know, I'm a nice person, you know, and I want to be more nice, you know, so I want to help people. But we really should, again, take a sober look at how our mind operates when we just sit and let it be itself. What kind of discontent, how it expresses its discontent with just being left alone, how it reacts to errant thoughts that will occur, what kind of emotions come up when we're stimulated by a random flyby thought about this one or that one. And we can see that our instincts are very self-destructive, are very not so wholesome. So then we should, so the bodhisattva discipline is give up negativity, practice virtue, which comes later, and benefiting beings. The third discipline comes much later. Let's not get hard. I mentioned beginners, and I'm a beginner, so we're all beginners. So first, give up negative actions, discipline of a bodhisattva, with bodhicitta. Oh, for the sake of all beings who are all suffering throughout space, I will engage in the discipline of not giving in to a negative comment that I was just going to make about somebody, like that, you know. Bodhicitta is there. It's not that you're just teaching yourself to shut up, but your intention is to place all beings in a state of enlightenment. I will do this conduct, I will do this act, or in this case, I'm talking, I will not do this act. That's a positive act of not doing a negative act. Then, so discipline, then bodhicitta, training in bodhicitta, thinking of this aspiration bodhicitta, wishing bodhicitta, like may all beings have happiness and the cause of happiness, may all beings be free of suffering and the causes of suffering. These kind of aspirations. We'll talk later about the 4 immeasurables in case you're getting anxious about that. But this kind of just this aspiration bodhicitta, And then trying to connect that aspiration with engaging bodhicitta, your mind. Then if you can actually act, then do it. Because if you have that act, if you have that bodhicitta aspiration and that bodhicitta of engaging, that intention to benefit others by engaging in the causes, and the opportunity arises for you to be generous, for instance, and you refuse, then you've cut your bodhicitta pledge. Your bodhicitta mind has been cut, and it's the fault. It's not that, if you don't act when an opportunity to help arises, it's a non-virtue. Bodhisattvas, non-virtue is very easy for bodhisattvas. There's no kind of neutral ground. So this discipline, then training in bodhicitta means repeating, even just repeating, almost like a mantra. This, may all beings be free of suffering and the causes of suffering. All beings must be placed in a state of enlightenment. I will do whatever I can to benefit beings, to put them on a state of enlightenment. Kind of always trying to go beyond just being a helpful person. Not stopping at being helpful, but enlightenment. Then that virtue contributes to the benefit of others infinitely. And then the third thing is to have some sort of formal, like meditation practice. So that's the way that you engage in a bodhisattva conduct as a, it's called the path of accumulation on like the beginner path of accumulation. You're accumulating merit and wisdom. But we'll talk more about that, but just to, okay, so these are the benefits we've talked about up to now, and we're on verse, we'll start next time on verse 20. I should have to mark, no, I'll remember. But so we did the first 20 verses, and there's 36 verses, so we're really moving quite along in a good way. As I'm really kind of being a little bit more deliberate here and kind of going into basic things like karma and suffering and so forth, because this is the time to do that at the beginning here. Then the second and third chapters are associated more with the actual pledge of a bodhisattva to take on the commitment of wishing and engaging bodhicittas. So that might go a little bit. I'm not in any hurry, but it might go a little bit quicker, the second and third chapters, maybe. Okay, so that'll be the end of tonight. So we'll go to the dedication of merit. Is an actual thing. That your attention your motivation, your lack of faults, like we talked about in the beginning, all these have occurred in your mind, and you and have become seeds. Karmically, they've become seeds for future fruition. In order to ensure that those seeds don't become like the plantain tree, the plantain fruit idea, but that they continue to mature and benefit beings and bring, that they are directed towards enlightenment, then we should recognize that virtue in our mind and mentally kind of release it or give it away or transfer it to others. Like you've got these seeds and you should, in a sense, kind of worry that you've got them and want to give them away. We'll talk about why you should worry maybe in the 5th chapter, the 6th chapter a little bit, because they can become, you can ruin them. So when you dedicate that all these seeds of virtue that I have imprinted in the stream of my consciousness and being buried in there like seeds, then may those seeds become the enlightenment of all beings. May those seeds mature for all beings as their easy path to enlightenment. So it's like you've worked almost like sometimes, parents, they work and then they set up like an education fund for their children, and then you deposit this money in their account for 20 years from now or something. That's kind of the idea of transferring. We're doing an inter-branch transfer from your mind to all sentient beings' minds. That I was patient, and own up. You were patient, you logged in, you did all the technology right, you paid attention and so forth, you heard all the teaching. So that was virtuous. Now you give the fruits away to all beings. So just put your mind in that attitude. And we'll recite this dedication and aspiration. Dedication has to do with past virtue, and aspiration is sort of setting the stage for future virtue. All the virtue of this practice and all that is gathered throughout the 3 times, I dedicate to all beings without exception, so that they may attain Buddhahood. Following and emulating the omniscient and courageous Manjushri, and likewise Samantabhadra, I completely dedicate all virtue. Since dedicating merit is praised as supreme by victorious ones of the 3 times, I completely dedicate these roots of virtue for the sake of practicing excellent conduct. May the teachings of Lord Buddha, the only source of benefit and happiness, long remain in this world. May the lives of those who uphold these teachings be as stable as a victory banner. Supreme Bodhicitta is so very precious. Where it has not yet arisen, may it arise. Where it has arisen, may it not decline, but evermore grow and flourish.